Allez, c'est vous?
There's a bed that used to be here. That's the back of the bed. That's funny.
My name is Chris Sanders. I'm one of the writers and directors of the Croods.
I would like to ask you a question about the colors and Croods.
Okay.
The backgrounds are so colorful. Is that because the family lived in the dark cave, or are they feeling the color in a funky way because of that? Is it a poetic license?
You know that you have it exactly right. It's a lot like the moment in Wizard of Oz when Dorothy goes from Kansas to being in Oz. We wanted the change to be dramatic, and we wanted the audience to be able to feel it to some extent, like the Croods are feeling it. So the land that you start the film with it's a lot like an American desert. It's very red, it's very brown, no water, almost zero vegetation. And when their cave collapses and the canyon they live in collapses, they are confronted with a world that is utterly alien to them. And that is it's like a jungle. The very first environment we present to them is like a giant, lush, deep, overgrown jungle. Where they come from in Crood Valley, you can see for 50 miles. But when they fall into that forest, they can't see more than a few dozen feet. And so it's very frightening for them. And the color is a big part of that, of course.
Obviously, in the forest, we have to think about Avatar. Was it on purpose?
No, you know, it's one of those things that inevitably happens if your environment is similar. It's the only environment that you could say has a very Avatar feel to it. Yeah. I think it's by virtue of the scale of the trees and the depth of the forest. It's one of those things that Avatar came out while we were making the movie, and we're like, oh yeah, we went to see the film and like, wow, that looks familiar. So yeah, I think it's an inevitable kind of parallel that you get at that one point. Yeah. Yes?
Hi, I'm Oceane from Scénariste.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I noticed that the cave is like a metaphor of the ignorance because they know nothing about outside, and when they get out, they discover everything, the fire, and it was you wanted this metaphor?
Absolutely. The interesting thing about working on any sort of movie, and it was no different with this one, is that there are certain themes that they're just inside the story, and you come across them as you're doing it. So the idea of the cave and being in the dark and stuff, it's something that's just part of the story, you know. But the more we worked on it, the more we realized, like, this is really, it's a metaphor for being in the dark, for limiting your experience, and for fixed thinking. Like one of the things about Grug is that he has rules that he lives his life by. Yeah, and he doesn't really have an imagination. He's never needed one, and I think that he fears it. And that's one of the things when they get out of the cave and they run into this new guy. He's like a modern man, and he has the world's first imagination. Of all the things that terrify Grug, nothing terrifies Grug, I think, as much as the imagination that this guy has, because he starts talking about things like tomorrow and going to tomorrow. And finding better places and stuff. And that starts to take root in Grug's family, this whole imagination thing, and that's scary to him. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to our group. Somebody should ask a question.
Yes.
Yes, you can ask a question.
I am Matthew from Scénariste.
Hello.
So my question is about your passion for the lovely monsters. You create Stitch, the monster will become nice. You create Toothless, which is a dragon, which could be bad and which is not bad. In this movie there are also some new monsters, like a big cat, I forgot his name. Why this passion? Where does this passion for lovely monsters come from?
I love furry animals with giant heads. The interesting thing about the tiger was that he was a latecomer to the film. The idea behind the Croods was that the villain of the movie would be the changing world, and that was a really tough thing to get across. And it was during the making of the film, you know, they're being chased by this phenomenon, this collapsing continent that they're on. And we started to think, you know, I need to give this phenomena a face, because it's just too off screen. Yeah. So we came up with the idea of this creature that wants to eat Grug. It follows Grug, like the tiger follows Grug, just like the crocodile follows Captain Hook in Peter Pan. He really wants to eat him. And no matter how far Grug goes, he can be underwater, he can be, you know, this thing will follow him everywhere. And the interesting thing, the cool thing about it is that he shows up again at the very, very end of the film. And that was not something that we thought of when we were writing the script. That actually came from one of our story artists who just threw that out there one day. And when he said this, you thought, yeah, of course. Why didn't we think of that? So I have to give, our story artist credit for that. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm David from Scénariste. We've talked about inspiration like Without a Pause or Avatar maybe. What are your other inspirations for the movie?
I'm going to give you one that you can look for. There was a direct homage to a moment in Beverly Hills Cop. We love this movie, and during the opening hunt, the Croods end up on this out-of-control mammoth. And that is a direct reference to the very opening of Beverly Hills Cop. Eddie Murphy is making a deal to sell cigarettes out of the back of a truck, and the police show up, and the guy who's driving the truck takes off, and Eddie Murphy's in the back of the truck, and this truck just like starts driving like crazy through these side streets, and that is a direct reference to that moment where these guys are trapped on the speeding mammoth. But there's even a shot. There's a shot because you just want to show the power of that truck, or they did. So there's a telephoto shot where that truck is coming up towards you, and it hits a parked car, and the car is just obliterated. It's just thrown to the side like a toy. And in our film, we have this elephant running towards you, and we have a telephoto shot of it hitting this big berm of sand and just exploding it and not even slowing down. So there's a lot of stuff that was inspiring, but that's a direct reference, an homage.
Okay, thanks.
Yes?
How did you get the idea to cast Emma Stone as Eve?
Yeah. She was Kirk D'Amico, who could not be here because he is having twins within, I think, I'm going to say within 48 hours. He's, I said as he was doing interviews, I said, these are the last images of you before you're a dad. So when you talk to your kids later, well, that was before you were born. I said, this is that moment. I forgot the question. Say it again. This is what happens.
How did you get the idea to cast
Emma
Stone?
Okay, I was talking about Kirk because when we started thinking about the voice for Eve, we both instantly said, we love this girl from House Money, who's Emma Stone. And this was before she did Easy A and did The Help. She was in the midst of making those films. And she was our first choice, actually, for Eve. We loved her voice, we loved her character. And yeah, so we were great. We spotted talent. We saw talent early on. Yeah, she was great. And I have to say, so much of Eve is directly pulled from Emma. She is the most animated actress I've ever recorded. And we always shoot reference while we do these recording sessions with these little tiny cameras for the specific reason that if during this recording they do something that we want to put directly into the character, while she was recording, Kirk and I are writing down our scripts, like, okay, use this for reference. So yeah, so we pull a lot of her actual facial expressions and put it directly into the film. Yes?
How did you make CGI more cartoony with the overacting of the characters of the movie?
Yeah, every film has its own vibe, and we knew that we could go broader with this. Part of the reason for that is just, it's a caveman movie, so I really felt from the very beginning like, you gotta satisfy people with like the broadness of the world in general. And it's one of the reasons that the Croods move as fast as they do. Physically, they're very gifted. So we wanted to do for cavemen what 28 Days did for zombies. We wanted to make them fast and strong and able to climb things and throw rocks miles. So physically, they are unlike any caveman I think that's ever been really put on film before. And it makes sense, given the world they live in. However, mentally, they're still beginner's minds. They live in a cave, they haven't really experienced very much. We talked about their lack of imagination. So mentally, I think they're much more what you would expect from cavemen from other films. They really have a lot to learn, beginner's minds. So that broadness was very deliberate. We wanted to get, and again, that's part of what the opening sequence, the opening hunt is all about, is telling the audience, setting the dials, if you will. This is the world that you're going to be seeing.
Do you miss classic animation?
Like hand-drawn animation. Yeah. I love classic animation. You know, every medium has its strengths, not only production-wise, but just emotionally. I actually think it's easier to get emotional reactions out of hand-drawn characters. I think it's more challenging to get them out of CG characters.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to be back on that?
Given the right story,
yeah.
Different stories have different needs. I always talk about Charlie Brown Christmas. If you went back in time and spent millions of dollars and did that in CG, I don't think it would ever really work. I think that works because of the way it was made. It fits the story perfectly.
Okay.
Yes?
Have you spent the direction of the movie with Kurt Domico? How do you dispatch the task between?
You know, we share almost everything. Co-directing on an animated film makes a lot of sense because it's a long process,
yeah.
4 or 5 years. For Kirk, it was 9. He was on it 3 or 4 years before I even got there. But there's a lot of writing and there's a lot of things to look at. So you're able to give each other a break sometimes when you need to. Like if one of us needs to leave for a few days, the other one will look after the store. But when it comes to writing the film, which is the main thing that we do, we write on the film and we follow it and we make sure that the story stays consistent as it goes into production. The most important thing to share with the co-director is shared sensibilities. You want to be making the same film. We work on the outline together. We're always in the same room when we do that. But then when it comes to writing the scenes, it's okay once you're working on the same outline and you share sensibilities, you can write the scenes separately. And that, I think, is a great strength because he's going to write a scene differently than I would write it. But as long as we're working on the same film, they'll all fit. And I think there's great energy and great innovation that comes out of working with somebody on something like that. So we write separately. We could be in the same room. Yeah. We've got our headsets on and we're looking down at our computers. And in my case, I can't really type, so I'm going like this as fast as I can. He can actually type, so he has an advantage. But then after we finish, we'll trade the scene back and forth. And the rule is you can do whatever you want. You can tear it apart. You can work things in whatever you want. And that's what we do. I think we're working to impress each other initially. No, he thinks this is funny. It's good. Yes.
So in the future, you won't direct a movie by yourself, alone. Maybe an indie movie with your characters, or the sketchbooks, maybe.
You know what? I think I'd love working with people. Partnering on animation makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if I'd want to do that alone because it takes so long. I think if it was something that was more like live action and was going to be in production a shorter amount of time, I'd be more interested in doing it alone. But as far as animation, I like working with somebody else. Just it's all work.
About live action, will you be tempted by directing an action live movie?
You know, it was interesting. While we were working on this project, we did a little live action film of our own, just because it was fast and relatively easy to do. So I think one of the interesting things actually is that there are so many live action projects that are heavily animated now. Everything's really mixed up. So I think if it was the right idea, you know, the right project, it had an element of fantasy in it, I'd feel comfortable doing that. I'd have to feel comfortable about my ability to direct it properly. So I think I wouldn't want to make too large a jump from what I'm doing now. Yes?
How was this project born?
That is a really good question. I can't 100% answer that. I wish Kurt was here because he was there at the beginning. It started with John Cleese and Aardman. I know that John Cleese was working on the film as early as 2004. And some of the things that he brought to the project stayed in the project in a big way. I know from talking to Kirk that John is not a fan of technology, and he thinks it's ruining the world, that's basically Greg's character, a fear of change and a fear of new things. So yeah, it's all still in there. Yeah.
The family reminds me the Incredibles.
Oh, you know that, okay.
Yes, because the baby, what is the baby? Because the baby is out of control, and it reminds me Jack. It was volunteer.
Yeah, I'd say she's also a lot like Bam Bam from the Flintstones. She's super strong and out of control. Yeah, you know, I understand why you don't see a lot of family animated movies. It's a daunting thing to work on. The weird thing is, like, I've worked on Mulan, which had armies of people in it, you know, so this had, in a lot of ways, it actually had the smallest group of characters I've ever worked with, but it actually had the largest group because those characters were always together. And most animated movies break characters off into like just pairs for long periods of time, and there's good reasons for that. The type of story they're telling, maybe 2s and 3s. That's a lot easier to deal with than a family, because we would get to the end of a sequence just writing it or storyboarding it, and we'd realize, oh, we left one of them out. One of them, we got to get that one back in. So keeping everybody's dynamic running the entire time was a huge challenge. There's huge benefits. I mean, now that we're at the end, I think we got a lot from it. But the actual making of it was a challenge. A very welcome challenge, but yeah, challenge nonetheless.
There is time left for one last question.
Okay.
Please.
What's your next project?
I don't know yet. That's a terrible answer. There are a lot of possibilities. There are a lot of things on the table. I'm doing a little bit of work on Dragons 2 right now.
Okay. Won't you work for the next How to Train Your Dragon?
Yes, I was just saying, it's in production now.
Yeah.
And I did not have time. I was supposed to do a little boarding on it yet. I was supposed to do a little boarding, but did not have time. So now that I have, now that I'm coming to the end of this, I think I'll have time to do some boarding on that. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Wait, I want a picture with everybody. Can you do a picture of us? Okay. All together? Let's do it. Okay. Got everybody?
One more.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You're up. Up.
Cool.
No more by me.
Go on. That's okay.